So it's the beginning of a new season, but I thought it might be a good time to just sort of review the Australia U21 campaign from last season. I thought I'd go through a few of the tools as well you get as the head manager of the national team. So obviously you've got the teams tab, which is the same, I think, as if you're not in a manager on the national team stuff. The players tab is pretty much the same, except you can see all the player skills, obviously. I'm not going to click on that because it's going to reveal player skills that we might not be able to otherwise see. We've got the news tab, which is basically I've got this little box where I can write news and you can see some news that I've done. Matches tab, I believe, is the same, except if we... Where are we? Results. Oh yeah, because this is under 21s. If I switch over to the senior team, just so you can see, this is where you can switch tactic as well. I've only got 2 tactics of the senior team going at the moment. Go back to the under 21s. The event tab is the same. You click on one, it basically tells you stuff based on the team that you click, so it goes straight to under 21 Australia. And that goes for any of the old tournaments as well. Statistics is the same. Player owners is the same. We can see the voting result. I'm not sure. I think everyone can see the voting result, but as you can see, I won with about 82% of the vote. Squad summary, similar to the player tab, it would reveal the skills of all the players who have been picked. We've got the search tab, so this is used in player scouting, but I'm actually going to go through player scouting in a little bit. We've got the tactics. So we have the tactics page. You can see that I haven't picked an under 21 squad, so that's why it's so barren. You can also see that the amount of substitutions that I had lined up for our last game that we lost. You can edit the jersey. I'm not 100% sure why they let us edit the jersey, but we can. So you can see our home and away, which pretty much matches up to what the Socceroos are playing with at the moment. I've got the challenge tab, so let's say I want to challenge, let's pick a European team, because we've got the Confederations Cup coming up. We've got Portugal here. And so basically you can play one friendly game per day. You just click send challenge and then it appears down here. Also, you've got incoming challenges. The list is empty at the moment. And finally, you've got the national the assistant thing. So I don't think this will work. Change assistant. Change. Doesn't work. Lol, lol, lol. Let's pick your mom because he is technically... Oh, actually, no, maybe not. Maybe let's not do that. Actually, I wonder if I pick Blue Dean, if it does anything. So Blue Dean doesn't have an account anymore. Yeah, there we go. Just in case it does something, I won't do that, but that's basically how you change the assistant. So how do you do scouting? Typically, I'd get the players tab open. I'd leave it on this side. I would then click in here. So this is MZ Live. You can also use Zente, which is a Spanish site. We'll let that load on its own. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick player from, Schoolage United, which is my team. So essentially what I would do is I would click on, usually I go 10 players at a time. But in this example, I'm just going to open one. And then we've got view. And then you can see. So the reason we can see the player stats on this page is because I own the team. If this was a random person's team, we would not be able to see the statistics. This is just the same as the player page, basically. So I hit view and then it comes up on the search tab and you can see the stats. Anyway, that's briefly what the NT tools are. It'll probably take... if you want to use this site, you have to go rankings, players, use the filter. This one, annoyingly, I can only do 100 at a time, but you can... It's also got a value filter, though, that you can use to sort of scroll down. To give you an idea, MZ Live doesn't take into account inactive teams. It'll give you literally all of the players. So if we go to the senior team, for instance, it will count players who are like 40... Whatever. Just because I know this one off the top of my head. Nolan, for instance, is 45, so he's on an inactive team. He used to play for my team, that's how I know. So he comes up in this list. So will all the inactive players, whereas on Zente, I don't think they do. I think you only get active teams on Zente. Anyway, that's a brief overview of your NT tools. Okay, so jumping into a few of the games from the campaign, we've got Australia-Estonia. This was a qualification game. We correctly predicted that Estonia would play a wing strategy. So we're playing 5 at the back to counter that strategy. Earlier in the qualifiers, I experimented with 1 defensive midfielder, and that went really badly. So we went with 2 for this game. Estonia played a pretty standard defense. Because we were committing 7 players behind the ball, we've only got 3 up front, and we weren't really expecting to generate a lot of scores. Our idea was to put guys behind the ball for about 60 minutes or so, and then sub into a wing strategy and try to win the game in the last half an hour. The other thing to note with this is we chose to attack down the same side as the Estonians, and this was mostly just so our players could find it easier to pass the ball down the field. It's a little bit harder and more riskier if you go short passing and if we were attacking down the left side rather than the right side of the screen. And we're just going to show one goal of the tactic in action. So at this stage it's 1-1, 50th minute. We're slowly moving the ball forward. So with only 3 attackers, we're expecting to mostly dribble the ball forward. Here the wing defender Simpson misses a tackle, so Norhani gets down the wing for Estonia, crosses the ball in. So Fazy, who's actually a defensive midfielder, that's one of the reasons why you want to play 2 defensive midfielders, is he actually gets back into the box there. So basically, this tactic is very good at wasting time, as you can see here. So the central Estonian defender makes an intercept. The defensive midfielder, the same one that was in the box earlier, runs into the attacking box this time and actually scores that goal. He actually didn't have a lot of shooting, but he had a lot of speed and ball control and tackling, which was our main reason for putting him where we did. So he's number 56 here, Lloyd Fazy. 52 was much slower, but has much more passing. So he's sort of like passing and tackling. So we put him in a position where he wouldn't have to cover as much ground, whereas 56 is covering, basically has to be able to cover like press up and also all the way back. So by making the tackle sort of near midfield, because it was a central defender for Estonia, probably was number 3 getting up the field to make an intercept and then being tackled by Fazy. Okay, it doesn't want to work. What if I do this? There we go. It allows Fazy to basically dribble all the way through on goal, and because all the strikers are on the other side, all the defenders are mostly too busy marking the more dangerous players. If we get it again. So there's the tackle on Nestra. And you can see where the defense is, there's a massive hole about where McCormick is. Alajan does get around the other central defender, but the other 3 sort of minding Carlos and Hendricks, allowing the goal to be scored. Okay, moving on to Australia-Brazil, which was the first group stage game in the Under-21 World Cup. We weren't sure what to expect from Brazil. So we actually predicted they were going to play wings. Well, in the end, I decided they're going to play wings at some point. So we're just going to play 5 at the back all game. They actually went short passing to start, which for us didn't go very well. We played quite a high line, again, expecting to be up against wings at some point. Essentially, because we couldn't really predict what Brazil was going to do, we sort of we, as the underdog, had to gamble either 3 at the back or 5 at the back. I think 4 at the back would have just been like, oh, we're going to concede twice early and get ourselves into too much of a hole to recover from. So we went with 5, and that did not really pay off. They went conventional at the back, and we went for short passing. And actually what we're going to do is we're just going to play the game in fast forward, and you can see 5 at the back being destroyed, so you can get the attacking midfielder getting behind the high central defender. And we get destroyed pretty early in this game. This is a goal here, just from having a lack of... So they had about 4 players in an attacking central position, and we've only got 3 defenders. So at that point, I'm there like, oh, this is going to be an absolute massacre. You can see we've basically got an identical attack to them with the attacking midfield and the 2 strikers. The main idea is you draw the central defenders out of position, and then you get balls like that going through. But basically, the first 20 minutes of this game was really, really bad for us. Brazil were really on top, but they didn't make us pay. Didn't make it pay. One thing I don't like about their formation is that they sort of bunch up that central midfielder and the attacking midfielder. Part of that is because we're playing such a high line, though. You can see the Brazilians getting through our defense again. And we'll just stay for one more attack, I think. So there we go again. So it's really like one pass and they're through on goal early, which was a obvious problem. So the question is, how did this game get turned around? And the obvious answer will be coming up in a moment. The sort of subtly, the stamina of the Brazilians, I'm sort of guessing, wasn't as good as our stamina, and my reason for saying that is because we sort of played our way into the game as it went on. There's a second yellow card and a sending off, which reduced Brazil to 10 men, which meant that they subbed off one of their strikers and put on a defender instead. But from that point onwards, the Australians pretty much got on top. The Brazilian attack was much, much less effective with just the one deep striker, which meant there was only one player who could break the line and get in behind the defense, whereas Australia's got 2, and you can see the Brazilian defense is almost immediately getting pulled up the ground in the center. You can see a lot of intercepts here, but generally I would say the Australian, we were making up ground. There's an example of Brazilians still getting through with 10 men. But we're going to keep playing. So here we've got the attacking midfielder getting through the middle of the 2 central defenders. And we're going to see that again here, this time running from the halfway line all the way and scoring the goal. And that was the equalizer. So after the first goal, so we had always planned, much like the Estonia game, to go to a wing strategy, expecting, wings if we were losing or drawing. In this case, we were drawing at the time. So we subbed on, you can see, a target striker who's getting the ball now, Millmaker. There was what I would describe as a poaching striker, which was Pucalis, and then a defensive player in Jasper Holden, who was very, very fast but lacked ball control. But you can see here a little bit of an errant pass, and that really fast player Holden getting the ball, running into the box and scoring, and that was our second goal. It was sort of like a secondary effect way of scoring for us, if that makes sense. I wouldn't consider... it wasn't... The primary way to score was board of a winger, board of a target striker. But on that occasion, we got a goal through basically a little bit of scrapping from Holden. And once again, we've got McGregor down the wing, trying for the target striker as is designed. And you've got Holden and Fazy. Fazy's playing central midfield now. Lots of defense. Basically, we're just trying to trap the ball in the Brazilian defense. And as you can see, because we're committing so many players forward in pursuit of goals, we're a little susceptible. But we'll keep playing because another key event happens soon. So you can see the Brazilians working the ball forward. We're getting a few interceptions, fortunately. Oh, also on the wings, we put our highest stamina defenders. So there, that pass is an example of what happened. So Holden, like I said, had a lot of speed, but not a lot of ball control. So he would have been through if he managed to control that pass. But that's just an example of the kind of trade-off that we had to think about when placing our players. The ball before was a little bit of a scrappy win when he got the when he scored the goal. The ball wasn't traveling as fast, so it was easier to control. Thus, his lack of ball control didn't really come into it. So this is basically the third goal, and it's mostly scored from having a target striker who had a lot of ball control as well. So he was able to win the ball after the header and basically score pretty much directly from a pass from a wingback. If we pause it here, you can see the closest attacking player is actually the target striker. Well, I can't show you the formation because it bugs up. But basically, so you've got the target striker. So the idea is he's got lots of ball control, so he can also score. The selection of him is partly to do with the fact that he can avoid that tackle. Long shot's a bit lucky, but you're always happy when I'm always happy when the players take those kinds of shots. And the last game I'm going to talk about is Romania Australia. So going into this game, we needed at least a draw. So our scout of Romania suggested that they were going to play 4 defenders, 2 defensive midfielders. But I also saw that in a couple of their friendlies, they had played this exact strategy of 3 at the back, 3 defensive midfielders, central midfielder, and then an slightly offset strike force. So because we were expecting them to play 4 at the back, we went with short passing. Unfortunately, we incorrectly predicted, so they ended up with 3 at the back. But we also correctly predicted that they were going to start short passing, so we pulled out a 3 at the back strategy that we, up to this point, hadn't actually played even in a friendly game. But as the underdog again, we had to take the onus was on us to take the big risk. So in terms of how obviously both teams playing very similar strategies. So for our attacking midfielder, we've gone Eden Orr, who was a very slow player but had a great amount of ball control and passing and shooting. And then the two pure strikers are both a bit quicker. They've both got a decent amount of passing and ball control. The goal scorer there, Carlos. So that basically they weren't our fastest strikers. Our fastest striker was Jasper Holden, who was mentioned in the last game, but due to his lack of play intelligence and ball control, was not picked for this game. Because I felt like it was more important to try to get the ball moving forwards. I didn't want too many of our attacks to sort of end like around the halfway mark. I want to sort of get to the edge of the shadows of the stadium. Alright, so what we're going to be looking at, firstly, the substitutions that we chose to make. So in this instance, because we were winning when substitution time came around, we elect to keep the strategy the same, and we're just going to sub one player on at a time. At halftime, I believe the Romanians, well, they did go to 4 at the back, and I think the thinking behind this was if they were losing, that they expected us to be playing a wing strategy rather than a short passing. So here we have the two strikers basically creating space for the attacking midfielder to go straight down the middle and score the goal. And one of the reasons why that was Eden Orr, who I talked about earlier, with lots of ball control and shooting and passing, but basically no speed. He was able to avoid the tackler with his superior ball control, get through on goal and score. So that goal made it 2-0. Anyway, that will wrap up our sort of look back at the under-21 campaign of the season. You can see we were eliminated by China, so I didn't cover this game because we lost to a red card, essentially. And I don't think that's that interesting to cover. The other game, we lost to Bulgaria. This was a game where we were sort of on top, but we conceded, and then because we conceded, we had to gamble and push more guys forward, which resulted in Bulgaria sort of creating more chances. It resulted in us creating we went down, so I went to create a more open, free-flowing, scoring kind of game, which worked in the sense that we scored, but also Bulgaria scored, so we lost that game 2-1. And the Estonia games just down here in the qualifications. Anyway, until the next video, I will be out.